space, we naturally think of the stars, solar systems, galaxy, the distant reaches of the universe.
But space has another dimension to explore, not outward, but inward, into all the basic elements of everything there is on our planet.
Here, a miniature world of space exists, a world filled with constant motion, one that went undetected for centuries. It is the world of the atom.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Free Radical Media Podcast. We've got a pretty fun show for you tonight. We're going to be speaking with Alokananda. I'm going to read a little bit from the bio of his webpage. Alokananda is an intuitive healer, wisdom keeper, channel, ordained minister, and initiate in multiple healing lineages. Deeply inspired by the mystic thread that is woven through the various lineages of the world, Alokananda has become an embodiment of the Rainbow Warrior, sharing his own authentic relationship to energy work, North and South American shamanism, yoga, Tibetan Buddhism, Qigong, bioenergetics, Tantra, and the ancient mystery schools. Alokananda currently tours giving lectures, teaching workshops, consulting, offering healing sessions, sharing ceremonies, and performing. Creatively, he is a visionary artist, writer, poet, singer, and community organizer. He is available for deeply personalized guidance and healing, as well as sharing with groups, festivals, organizations, and retreats. Alokananda, welcome to the Free Radical Media Podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Why don't you start by telling us how you got interested in these subjects and how you began this practice?
Yeah, so for me, it's all grace. It's always wild looking back, as opposed to where you were when you're starting, right? So for me, my relationship to all these things that you just named have changed dramatically over the years. Our relationship to everything is obviously always changing and evolving, but for me, basically, I went into a healing crisis in college, and basically I was very, very active human being. I played a lot of basketball and martial arts, and I had read books on Castaneda and had explored with psychedelic mushrooms when I was a teenager, and had some peak spiritual experiences throughout my life and even in my childhood, just being in the woods or whatever. But I woke up semi-crippled one day in college. I just couldn't walk right. I was in a lot of physical pain, and I don't know exactly how it accumulated, but, I think the martial art that I was studying had a lot of deep esoteric pieces to it, and the internal energy and the repetitive stress, and, playing 10 full-court games of basketball and then sparring and then going out boozing. I was just hard on my body and didn't know that I was empathic or that I had a hypersensitive nervous system. And so I think it's just the accumulation of those choices just added up, and I found myself, really depressed because I had gotten my meditation, so to speak, from the movement of basketball, from the movement of martial arts and all those things. And I found myself, really desiring healing my body. I was, it was discouraging to be, in my 20s and not able to move my body the way that I was used to. And so I had gotten this cast iron teapot from my sister as a gift before I got into my first apartment in college that I lived in. And one morning I made tea, and I was just sort of in the state of kind of accepting where I was at, and it was just the morning light and with this cast iron teapot, and I dropped deep into a meditative state of stillness that was incomparable to the more fleeting feeling of that I found as a teenager through movement, through basketball. And I found the stillness of the universe for the first time in stillness, in being present with the team. Sort of woke up a past life memory of being a Taoist hermit. and just give them the tea. So it triggered something in me, and something stirred in me that was like, okay, like there's something to this feeling of stillness. There's something to what's happening to me right now. Like somehow trust this. And you know, I had experimented with a lot of different things in college, and you know, shortly after that experience, I like had one more exploration, and sort of hit this rock bottom feeling of just awful discontentment in my soul. And I was like, "This the only way to go from here is up." And I just made a commitment to my soul. And during the time, I was also reading Autobiography of a Yogi, and there was definitely a transmission in that book that also contributed to this remembrance of who I was as a soul. And I got this really deep burning desire for liberation, for moksha, for awakening. And within a week, I gave up eating meat, smoking pot, drinking alcohol, watching TV, all in 1 week. And I just pretty much disaffiliated from my fraternity. And I was burning and thirsty for spiritual wisdom. And I would drive to Ithaca to try to find monks to hang out with, and like go to like head shops to talk with people, or bookstores to relate with people, because my college scene culturally was pretty devoid of any real open-hearted, open-minded awareness, except for a couple of professors that I was friends with. So I was going through this massive awakening with no one around to reflect it to me, and the only person that I knew who was living this way was my mom's best friend's daughter. She was actually in a meditation retreat in the Himalayas. She was like in a cave doing yoga practices when I'm reading Autobiography of a Yogi. And you know, interesting enough, as soon as I graduated and I went to India, I ended up meeting up with her, meeting her guru, who gave me that name, Alokananda, that I walked with. And so it's interesting, the synchronicities. You know, and after India and after graduating, I basically graduated college and waited tables and went right to India to study yoga and to seek spiritual awareness. And from yoga and becoming aware of this philosophy, of this understanding of these different pathways of mastering one's breath, one's awareness, meditation, all these things, I ended up at an ashram in upstate New York, and just cooking food, and learning how to cook Ayurvedic food, and very deep in the yoga philosophy. Basically, we're more than just the body and the mind, that we're consciousness. And my journey brought me to Costa Rica and more into this pathway of shamanic healing. That sort of, right before I left to Costa Rica, I was leaving a very long, beautiful but also codependent relationship for 4.5 years, and sort of went into my shamanic initiation, and found myself living in the jungle in this little hut, this retreat center, cooking and teaching yoga, and then eventually ended up at this community in Costa Rica that had all of these shamanic pathways available. They had ayahuasca ceremonies hosted there, and sweat lodge and QP ceremonies, and it really stirred something in my soul. It was like another piece of me was being ignited. And I was already in mentorship with my teacher in bioenergetics therapy, and doing starting to move into the emotional work. So yoga introduced me to consciousness. The bioenergetics work introduced me to the idea of the inner child, or emotional work, and then the red road, or the shamanic path, if you will, brought me into awareness of trance states and the ancestral energies. It gave another clue to how to embody, how to open the heart through song and through prayer. It almost, the prayers of that way stimulated something in my heart deeper than the mantras at the time from yoga. And eventually, over time, now for me, like when I sing or I chant a mantra, it's all coming from the same place. They're just extensions of that very core aspect of my being. But at the time, once I found myself in the sweat lodge, I knew I was home. I was like, this is my church. And from there, it's just, once you're seeking and once you have that burning desire for awakening, you call to you the teachers and the beings that are there to help you remember who you are, to help you remember that you're soul, that you have a purpose on this planet. And for me, it's all grace. The entire story up until this point is it's all the grace of the Guru, if you will. It's all the grace of spirit, and I'm just my personality is just a way for my soul to express itself at this point.
Wow, that's a quite interesting awakening process. I'm kind of curious though. You seem to really have delved into both the sort of shamanistic paradigm and the yogic paradigm. And what do those two things, how do they overlap and sort of contrast each other?
It's interesting to me. Like, yoga in its essence is a shamanic practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Lord Shiva is a shaman. He's the original primordial shaman. He drank poison to save humanity. And, there's so many references of plant spirit medicines in the Kathmandu Valley. It's ridiculous, from the Shiva Babas that smoke ganja to pray to the Amrita, which is a mix of ganja and mushrooms and milk and ghee and stuff. So there's definitely some wild, like, esoteric plant spirit medicine in that Indus Valley that I think pre-existed to the mysticism of the yoga system as we know it, but it's not necessarily recognized in that way. And also, the emphasis of these practices when they came to the West, a lot of it got diluted. And so, it's really all about the person that you're learning from. It's their transmission of their understanding of soul, of spirit, because essentially the place that we want to end up is the place beyond all lineage. We want to end up in the place that exists beyond lineage. And so for me, yoga and shaman, all of it all comes from the same place. There's different expressions of it. So the taste of yoga, has in it aspects of these other pathways, and these other pathways have aspects of yoga. The one cool thing that I really like that is a nice way of sort of defining or redescribing different ways of self-mastery, self-realization, are the four paths of yoga. And the four paths of yoga are in every mystical tradition that exists. So you have jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, you have Raja yoga, and you have karma yoga. And
sure.
so those four paths exist in every spiritual, religious, esoteric, practice or modality that exists on the planet has that expression of those four paths. So, real quick, karma yoga is self-service. You dissolve the ego by giving yourself freely. So Mother Teresa is a karma yogi. Bhakti yoga is the yoga of devotion, that you sing to the deity, you sing to that whatever form that your human mind can possibly grasp as a way of accessing the divine. You sing to that, you praise that, and you eventually become that, or that opens your heart enough to get a direct revelation of the spirit. So, like, a lot of the native traditions have these really powerful songs, so to me that's an aspect of Bhakti yoga. And then Raja yoga is the royal path. It's, the 8 limbs of yoga, it's pranayama, like meditation, the yoga asana, the postures. And so you have that in Sufism. You have these movements that they do, Qigong, the Taoist lineage it's a form of yoga, Raja yoga. It's mastery over the body and the winds, the pranas of the body. And then you have jnana yoga, which is, the studying scripture and meditating on it and sort of contemplation, so that you get a direct revelation or a transmission of the scriptures that you're studying. So whether it's Kabbalah or the Egyptian Dead Sea, whatever, there's a jnana yoga in there. And so I think that we need all four paths. And they say that karma yoga balances out the jnana yogi, like the guy that's reading all the books. Karma Yoga balances out the Raja Yogi, the guy who can get really self-involved in his physical practice needs to give of himself also. So like, you're not just like hiding in your room doing 3 hours of yoga and then you're not feeding anybody, or you're not like doing the dishes, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then the Jnana Yogi, the person that has his head in the book studying scripture, he needs Bhakti Yoga though. He needs to open his heart also, so he's not just in his mind. And so I think that for me, I've found the balance of all 4 of these, and that's what I seek to have is to like adapt to what the moment is teaching me. So like, it's really nice to do my physical practices. It makes me feel good and nourishes me, but also learning to give myself freely, in the moment, and to sing, singing the songs for me has become my favorite way of practicing. Like that opens my heart, that opens my connection with spirit more than anything at this point. It's just the different songs from around the world, the various expressions of the one same spirit, right? So I just think that's a cool way of redescribing it for me. So that you put it in that sense, the shamanic overlap with yoga is that yoga is inherently shamanic at the core of it, basically.
I like that
and
description of kind of an integrated practice, right? Mm-hmm. Because you do find these paths all over the place. I mean, it's kind of this universal concept of spirituality that Aboriginal peoples, we just have in our consciousness, right? Like human beings just intuitively know that these are the paths toward a higher state of being, And I like that idea of this integrated practice that brings all these things together, because otherwise you find yourself out of balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and I'd also say that it's about forming an authentic relationship to each one. It's like what inspires your heart, what inspires authentic action, not automatic responses, or not like developing a philosophy to just keep you feeling safe in the world, but to move you forward, to genuinely move you forward on your path, right? So it's like, I was saying our relationship to everything can change. It's the willingness, I think, at essence, the spiritual path is the willingness to let go of the idea of yourself and be willing to face the feelings that happen along the way. So it's like these things are just different roadmaps, right? Like yoga's a roadmap, qigong's a roadmap, the Red Road's a roadmap. But if we don't have our own authentic relationship to that lineage or to that modality, if we're not developing a relationship with it that's really, that we're actually connecting to it and not just following the motion, then it won't serve us unless we're connecting to it authentically. And I think at the time that we're living in, because there's so much available, and some of it's watered down, and you have to like find what where the good teachers are and what's authentic, and that process of discernment is really important. Of like, what is genuinely speaking to my soul, my spirit, what is genuinely fueling the fire of my spirit, and what is conceptual, and to find the ones that fan that feeling inside, and find the things that fan the feeling inside, because the feeling is more important than the thing itself.
Sure. That's close to the existentialist definition of authenticity, capital A authenticity. Like that knowledgeable action, like action that is taken out of a recognition of free will, that existentialist concept of authenticity, where you're not just doing something to do it, you're doing something knowledgeable and that actually resonates with the sense of self, capital S, self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's unique that you really do have such an interesting conglomerate of different practices you borrow from, because it really is a perfect example of how you were just saying that we really do have access to all these different spiritual modalities, and it's almost like we're coming to an era where we really could borrow from what resonates with us and sort of make our own tailored spirituality, rather than just sticking to one pure lineage. Not that there's anything wrong with sticking to any one pure lineage, but I feel like this is really the first time in history that humans have had access to this depth and wide variety of spiritual knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of people out there would, have a lot of attachments to the one lineage way, or the, you'll just be a bee sipping from many different flowers, or, you could dig a bunch of holes, but you'll never dig a well. But if you're letting that inner force truly guide you, and you're trusting, and you're willing to show up, and you're willing to let go of your idea of who you are as you connect to these things, then it's going to lead you down that path. And you may find something that really, really speaks to you, and that you don't need something else for a while. Like, I have friends that practice Kundalini yoga, and that works for them. And it's like, yeah, great. Those mantras, those practices are awesome. And then, some of them ended up sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies also, and that works for them too. Or they, now they're drinking cacao or whatever.
Sure.
It's like they're following their bliss. And that idea of following your bliss. But the thing that I guess for me that I try to emphasize in relating within these things is a few things to look out for. One is spiritual bypassing, which is using the spiritual techniques or modalities or philosophies as a way to bypass the feelings, literally the deeper, darker shadow emotions. And there are specific lineages or the specific pathways that are designed to help you get in touch with the suppressed, unclaimed aspects of self. And that is so important. And if you're doing that work, then I feel like so much more is coming. So much is coming. Like, we can get really high on God, right? We can get really high and go up into the celestial energies. There's so many ways to do that, especially in this time and age. There's people that, there's like things that I never even heard of, that can really take you out of your body or have a peak experience, but can you ground it? Can you bring it into your body, into your life, into relationships? That's an evidence. That's like good evidence, right? Or if like you're trying to find a good spiritual teacher and they don't have a sense of humor, you probably don't want to study with them. Looking for the integrated aspects are great, tools of discernment, and so that's definitely one of them for me is sort of like planting that seed to anyone out there that might be listening, or just in general something that I try to track within myself or with people is the willingness to face our feelings is a core of spiritual path, and that is the dark night of the soul, and the dark night of the soul is what helps you embody as soul. And so if we're just getting high all the time, we're not willing to go into the darkness of losing our present attachment to identity, then it can't evolve. It will just be a security blanket.
Right. In a sense, we're sort of denying the world. The worldly life isn't a celestial realm. It's a realm of passion, and there's some not so nice things that are present in worldly existence.
Yeah, it's not easy being human.
Yeah.
It's hard to be human sometimes, and but the thing that I'm discovering more and more, all these ceremonies, I used to put ayahuasca on the pedestal, or like ceremonial space on the pedestal, and then eventually I learned more and more that like every single day is a ceremony. Mm-hmm. It's all sacred, and sometimes I'm more connected to that, and other times the mundane feels really mundane, and it's hard to celebrate it. But I'm finding the more that I can really find the sacred in the simple, the sacredness of just having a conversation with a stranger, and they're opening up in that moment, and they're sharing, really sharing who they are, and so there's something really sacred about that. So I feel like the attention that we give things, resonates that opportunity to have life be a ceremony.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if all is God, then you're essentially looking at the divine in everything you do, and everything you talk, each person you talk to, everything you see. So in a way, as you open up to that more, you start to see the energy inside of people, and it becomes a more open experience for everyone.
Yeah, and that's exciting. It's like we're getting to a point where we can't bullshit each other anymore. It's like, if someone's not speaking truth or their truth or whatever, like, everyone feels it on some level. You know what I mean? Like, we're getting to a point where, and this is an interesting idea. They talk about, I'm sure that you guys have read things, or, I'd say that this is an accepted expression for our time within our sort of fringe culture, is apocalypse literally means unveiling or revealing, right? So we're in the age of revealing, and that means, like, we can't really lie. It's all revealing. It's all going to be revealed, and everyone, even the mass consciousness, is seeing the more and more bullshit. In, like, I think I remember, like, at one point there was the whole swine flu thing. A lot of people were like, nah, I don't really buy that. Like, people that maybe wouldn't have bought it 2 years ago weren't really buying it, because it's if it's not true, it's gonna show up, and you're gonna see it. So, and in that way, it's kind of an awesome setup for all of us in the community, because it's like, if we can't lie to each other anymore, all we can do is get real. Then all our relationships are getting upgraded all the time, for us to show up with more of ourselves, to have that opportunity, like I was saying, to claim those feelings, to claim those unclaimed aspects of ourselves, because that comes up in relationships. The people can see our blind spots, and we can see other people's blind spots, and when we're in community, it brings that stuff up to the surface, and that actually can catalyze more spiritual growth than a lot of things. It's just relating.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's like a purification almost for everyone involved. Yeah, definitely.
And I absolutely agree that, you're right. Everyone, it seems like, even people in mainstream culture, it's acknowledged that everything around us is absurd, right? And I think that's deeply ingrained in our consciousness. That's why we see so much cynicism within mainstream Western culture, right? Because we look around and it's clear everything is absurd. It's just that most people don't know what to do about it, so that creates this kind of, crisis of self, I suppose, in most people. I think that's a major reason why our culture is so toxic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I also think a lot of it's toxic because of the suppression of feelings.
Yeah.
When you suppress your feelings, your body, it's like the milk curdles, and so it's like a combination of, like, default choices and a disconnection from the earth, and therefore disconnection from self, which, so it's like the default choices are kind of unfulfilling, and everyone's sort of like, yeah, I'm unfulfilled, so are you, look, here we go. Like you're saying, the cynicism of unfulfillment, and so
right.
I agree with what you're saying. I just frame it in a different way of, like, it's one is the setup of collective agreements or a collective agreement field around the resistance or the shaming or the hiding or the suppression of certain sets of feelings, and then the other part of that is just the default conditioned choices with that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, that it's almost like it's a collective agreement through consensus reality, it's I don't know, it's frustrating to me, certainly. I think it's a good way to segue into talking about healing, because you do a lot of healing work. If our culture is so sick, how do you think we can heal ourselves? How do you think we can heal our culture?
I live in a different culture now. So when we say our culture is sick, I think what you're saying is the Western culture is sick, yeah?
Well, essentially, yeah. Our mass consensus reality,
consumeristic culture.
Exactly. Yeah. Of which we're considered to be a subculture. You know what I mean? It's people use terms like that.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to understand clear what you're saying. So yeah, I guess how do we stay healthy in a sick world is kind of what you're saying.
Exactly.
And, I don't think there's one answer to that. I can go into some of what has helped me or what I've seen help other people. It's like culture is part of society, but society is made up of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the way that we can heal, we have to take responsibility for our own lives. That's really the only thing we're actually responsible for. And so when we're willing to take responsibility for our own lives, the universe meets us halfway and starts to help us take responsibility for our own life. And I think a lot of that, is leaving the codependency of the culture. It's leaving the dependencies. So where am I giving away my power in my relationships? Where am I looking to get nurturing from outside of myself through whatever, substance or person or avenue? It's really about becoming sovereign and empowered. Mm-hmm. The more empowered people are, the more informed and empowered their choices will be, and informed, empowered choices create tangible change. So it's really, how do we really empower people again? And I you can look at this from a very simple, tangible, human, bottom line, nitty-gritty way in, like I say, in the emotional realm, or you can get into the more esoteric and spiritual realm of there's beings that have existed within the cycle of time that have intentionally tried to cut people off from their power.
Mm-hmm.
There's that whole approach and viewing of the mass consciousness that hey, these ideals that people are living under have been engineered for you. This set of choices that has been spoon-fed to you is designed to keep you completely disconnected from who you really are, which is an empowered soul, which is an aspect of infinite source energy.
Absolutely.
And so until we plug back into infinite source energy through ourselves, until we can unplug from the matrix, so to speak, and plug into the other thing that's actually more fulfilling, sustainable, nourishing, enjoyable, people are going to keep making choices. So we have to find a way to unplug ourselves, and I think that we unplug ourselves in stages. And there's initiatory pieces to the unplugging. Some people get woken up in some ways, and then it's not like we wake up once and then we're woken up. It's there's not just one dark night of the soul. There's many, and there's going to be more until you merge with that aspect of soul. And so, for people, for me personally, in this one's journey, in the journey of my life, 9/11, I lost, family in 9/11, and that stirred something in my consciousness, and I began to question the media. I was studying journalism in college. I went down a rabbit hole trying to find out what the hell happened to my brother, my brother-in-law, who was a fireman, and I was like, whoa, and it just, so my worldview shifted dramatically from that experience and led me down that more conspiratorial pathway of there are beings holding the wealth of power. A lot of what Zeitgeist and all those movies are finally getting put out there are talking about that. For a lot of people, is the first thing to wake them up. For me, it's different for everybody. A death of someone, a breakup, losing your job, anything that's challenging your attachments or how you define yourself as an identity is going to move you either towards victimization or empowerment. And it's that choice to move towards empowerment that gets someone on the path of initiation. So then every relationship, every circumstance, everything that's happening is there to help wake me up, is there to help initiate me to become a sovereign, embodied, empowered soul, co-creating my own reality, co-creating my own universe on a quantum level.
Yeah, definitely.
And so,
Yeah, Yeah, it's like an
So it's
awareness.
about everybody taking responsibility for themselves, and that's just to conclude. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
You know, like you're saying, how do we do this as a culture? Is that we won't do it as a culture. We're only going to do it as individuals getting empowered, and so I think the subculture being able to become more widely accepted, or the subculture that we're a part of becoming more accessible to the masses is definitely a way to contribute to people, you know, exploring a new set of choices that are healthier.
Yeah, definitely. It's an individual awareness. You have all these different events that happen in your life, and you can either choose to fully embrace them and see what points led up to that specific event in your life, the choices you've made, and it can allow you to either have profound growth, or you can reduce inside of yourself and become a shell, or live in a sort of a fear, or you can just embrace that experience and say, okay, how can I grow off of this? How can I improve myself? You know, maybe something that you were doing in your life was negative, and you realize that that's what led to that experience. Well, cut that out of your life. Or, you know, some people, they just keep doing it, they don't see it. You know, and it is definitely a self road. There's no way really to explain to someone their life. I mean, each person knows their life the best, and it's their responsibility to reflect on themselves and their experiences and their journey to be able to improve their lives and improve their health.
Yeah, and it's also the willing. You know, the reality is that we all need support, and that's the difference of the esoteric spiritual practices in our time. We're in the age of Aquarius, and it's the rebirthing of community, of connection. In the age of Pisces, a lot of us renounced the world, went off into the cave and did the yogic practices. We went off into the woods. We disconnected from the sickness that we're talking about. In this lifetime, in this Aquarian age, we're bringing the medicine that we learned from those lifetimes into the world. It's about being in relationship to the world this time. Can you maintain your Buddha nature in the subway? You know, and it's also like accepting, like really truly accepting at a core level, hey, I need support. And when we're willing to receive support, it shows up in our life. And it's really about, you know, like that support can change your life. When you're willing to really receive genuine support, it's a game changer. And so, like, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have authentic, consistent, unconditional love and support from my teachers, from my mentor. You know, my mentors, like that, they mirror back to me unconditional love in places that I didn't know how to yet love in myself, right? So, and that's what I do for other people at times. Like we will access an emotion, or we'll access a trauma. And this is the thing I also want to say, is that most people are traumatized at some level. Like being born into this world is traumatizing for like 85% of the population, unless you had a home birth and you were birthed into like a warm tub of water, and they waited 2 hours to cut your umbilical cord, and they didn't circumcise you. You have trauma of some sort in your nervous system. That makes you distrust life on some level. And when you distrust life on some level, you distrust the universe, and you distrust people, and then, you know, you have something to protect. You have something to defend, you know. So we have to be willing to go into our trauma and our pain if we want to learn how to trust and then get the things that we say that we want for our life. And so it's that support thing, man. I'm telling you, it's all about support. And, you know, so what I do with people is I help take them into their trauma and love them while they're facing the feelings that they've never faced before. I help hold that safe container for them to feel their feelings that they didn't know they cut off from, so that they can become whole again, wholesome, you know. So it's like, let's say there's a pocket of grief that's there from some childhood trauma, and, you know, like mom or dad was like, "Bad Mikey," you know, and they shamed Mikey for feeling sad, and so Mikey created a whole pattern of survival around, I'm not allowed to feel sad, because when I feel sad, mommy and daddy withdraw their love from me, and so I have to pretend to be happy all the time. There's a mask forms. So the unveiling, this age of revealing, it's like it's time to take off the masks, and that can be fucking terrifying to people. Pardon my language. Is to take off our masks, and you know, and really, what's on the other side of all our masks are just feelings. At the end of the day, there's vulnerable, tender feelings in every single human being, and it's what we're defending against, and it's what we're shaming other people, we're making other people wrong, we're blaming other people, we're trying to get power from other people, we're giving our power away to other people, and that whole sick game just comes out of trauma of some sort. And that's what we get the opportunity to interrupt, heal, claim, transmute when we commit to our healing process.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, I read a few articles recently, one saying that culture as a whole in the West, you know, people seem to manifest symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder without experiencing any identifiable stress. Okay, you know, like being involved in a natural disaster or a war, things you usually associate with post-traumatic stress disorder, that just, you know, your average person on the street seems to identify with those symptoms. And secondly, that we have this kind of endemic, systemic manifestation of mental illness, you know, that what they call generalized anxiety disorder or clinical depression in people, that's due to just the stresses in everyday life, right? That our culture is just kind of designed in such a way that it manifests these symptoms in people. You know, so like just the trauma of being alive in the West imposes these psychological effects on you. You know, it really makes you sick. You know, and of course, our culture's response to this is to, you know, make a bunch of chemical pills and feed them to you for, you know.
Yeah.
But
it's a pretty bizarre and sick setup. You know, I've been told, like, if you know, like a lot of the higher dimensional beings, when they look at Earth, they see an insane asylum.
Yeah.
It's you know, and we come here to go through experiences to grow as a soul, and there's a lot of disconnection out there, and there's a lot of trauma, and it's real, and it's something that we can develop genuine compassion for, and that we don't have to necessarily feel victimized by also. You know, we get to respond to that suffering. We get to have a genuine response to all that suffering, because when we come down to the realization that we're all the same, and we all have stuff that we got to look at, and we all have, you know, some version of suffering, and you know, our compassion is one of the greatest powers that we're endowed with as human beings. And so, you know, it's going to take a lot of compassion to help shift this paradigm. A lot of compassion and a lot of action, like action coming from a place of compassion and embodied power. You know, because you know, I think a lot of it's just like a lot of that. You know, a lot of people have different philosophies of what would heal all that. You know, and I think really at the end of the day, is we've disconnected from our Mother Earth, our source of nurturing in this. While we're in this body, while we're here in this body, you know, we're on this earth, and so to come back into the right relationship with her and each other is really the path of healing the planet. Because as long as we've created a separation, that we're as a species separate from the planet, it's like the liver being like, I ain't a part of the body, I'm a liver. I'm gonna do whatever I want, and then the liver like kills the entire body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with our system, is that, you know, we're the only species that would, like, you know, that we can't separate from the organism.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, isn't that what cancer is on a microcosmic scale? You know.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of what I'd say red flags that are trying to get people's attention, humanity's attention, to say, hey guys, like, get your shit together and grow up. You're being a bunch of babies, basically. You're acting out. You know, the dictator in some other country that's like, you know, whatever. It's he's acting out of survival programs as much as the businessman somewhere else, like everyone's pretty much functioning in some layer of post-traumatic survival programming. And so in order for us to evolve as a species, as a consciousness, we first have to like leave the survival game thing. And we can start that with our own nervous system. Like, hey, I don't feel safe all the time. Sometimes, you know, that's something that I've been working on in my process. You know, I've always felt safer in spirit. So to speak. I've always felt safer in the celestial realm. So my willingness to come into my body, I had to face a lot of feelings of terror and unsafe, and that I know, without a doubt, comes from past lives of being tortured for my spirituality, of being persecuted for being empowered. You know, and so even within the subculture, if we ground out, if we get ourselves super grounded as a subculture, and we're willing to face our feelings, and we're willing to get organized, and we're willing to embody our power, we can shift the whole system, I think. You know, it's learning how to play the game without becoming the game, and it's also by creating something absolutely new. It's like, okay, that didn't work. That's not working. That's killing people. It's killing our planet. We're killing ourselves. Well, what do I want to create?
Right.
You know, what do I want to build? You know, and so I think a lot of us are looking at alternative ways of living in community. We're looking at alternative ways to sort of gradually shift out of the hyperdependency on this culture, and eventually, I think we'll be birthing an infrastructural network of connection that is an empowered community that's living in harmony with the earth and each other, and that we can show that example. And that, you know, it's like it's either grow up, wake up, or be annihilated in some ways, you know, gradually. And so, you know, there's other layers to it. There's the esoteric perspective that we can shift timelines and that we can manifest a parallel reality in each moment, that we're changing our resonance or how we resonate our energy, and that we can eventually collectively, as we realize that we're not separate from the source creator, that we're co-creating a reality, that we will create a planet that we prefer to live on an energetic level, like literally leap timelines and create a planetary situation where there's no war and there's no chemtrails and there's no, you know, us versus them, because we've evolved out of that in our own nervous system.
Yeah. So I mean, how do you feel with the perspective that all of this is basically a karmic sort of momentum that serves the purpose of ascending us to the next level? Like this isn't just something that we did because we're ignorant. This is something, there's an actual purpose behind this, that this is all basically going according to some sort of divine plan.
The divine plan. Yeah, you know, I think that's, you know, when you say that, I feel a pulsation of truth in my heart that that's true. Why this is the setup and how that's going to look, I don't know. But that feels true to me, you know, because I trust the divine and it's happening. And so it's like, you know, there's one pretty far out high spiritual teaching on the earth plane, that Lucifer, if you will, the concept of the archetype of Lucifer, that Lucifer was a 12th dimensional angel. Okay, so he's one of the closest energies to the prime creator source of everything. And he chose to descend 12 levels in resonance, descend from that heightened place, literally have a fall from heaven, so that it can create a sphere of duality for us to have an experience to choose to go back to God or not. And so the 1%, if you will, are a collective manifestation of a Luciferian concept that is an 85 percentile self-serving choice-making. So 85% of the choices are self-interest. And that them making those choices actually is serving our divine calling to wake up and merge back with Source. And so in that sense, it is a divine setup that, like, all the chaos and all the war and all the pain and all the suffering is really there to show the contrast of, well, is this what you want, or do you prefer something else? Because you can always climb the ladder of ascension and like re-merge with the highest aspect of love that there is possible, and fulfillment and bliss. So, I think it is a divine experiment, and I like that concept. Not because it's like, makes me feel better about the world, because I still, I have pangs when I see. Now, every now and then, I'll drop back into my more dualistic view of the world situation, but for the most part, I've come to a point where I just send those energies love, and I realize that they're an aspect of that they're helping me wake up without the contrast, without them trying to enslave. I wouldn't have chosen empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up the philosophy of the fall, because I feel like that philosophy, I could talk about it for hours. It's, such a deep philosophical concept, the morning star falling from heaven, very deep Kabbalistic, connotations there. And the same thing's mirrored in the Tao tradition, in the Tao Te Ching. The Tao manifesting itself, mirroring itself as a duality, and then morphing into a trinity from which all creation, came. It's strange that these different cultures all come up with the same kind of traditions, the same kind of philosophies. It's fascinating that these things are so deeply buried in our consciousness.
Yeah, there's a primordial memory that we can all access, and the different cultural expressions of that one primordial expression, and that's why we gotta find what works for us, and in the time that we're living in is considered a time of ascension, that we can, as souls, choose the path of initiation to go into full mastery over our consciousness, and that's what we're here to do. And as we do that, we become collective embodiment of the Christ consciousness, if you will.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea, or that feeling of being a Christed being is the initiated. We are being initiated in that way to bring harmony once again to the universe, perhaps. That's why we incarnated. And, for me, in my journey of initiations, I've had visceral, undescribable deep experiences of accessing timelines of myself that existed in some other version of me that has studied a Tibetan pathway of mastery. And so I'll be doing a healing session, and all of a sudden I'm chanting Tibetan that I've never learned in this lifetime. It's just coming through me because it's an aspect of me. And I think that a lot of us older souls, there's different soul levels. We're transitioning from old souls to teacher souls, or from teacher souls to master souls. There's a lot of new souls in the world that have to go through these processes. So there's this idea of soul growth in different stages of development of soul awareness. And so I think the old soul energy is really recognizes the unification of all the traditions, because we've incarnated through all of them, or through many of them. So we see the one in many. We see, and we feel a resonance. Why are we so attracted to certain things that are from a totally different culture? Because our soul recognizes it. When I was 7 years old, I begged my parents to send me to Shaolin. I was like, I need to go to Shaolin and study Kung Fu. And they were like, what? 7 years old. I had the deepest compulsion to go to China and study. And they put me in Aikido and karate in the YMCA, and it was like kind of miserable. And I remember that desire to just like be in one place and have a routine to study and master my body, and it was so unfulfilling learning like karate in a YMCA gym. So like all our karma and all the things that we're attracted to is absolutely right in front of our eyes. And in our relationships, in our choices, and the things that we're attracted to, we have to learn to trust that. There's something there. There's some medicine for you to reclaim. And as we reclaim that thread of our mastery, or whatever,
Sure.
okay, what this piece wants to ignite in me. And it happens at festivals. I mean, like, my goodness, because we'll be with 100 we'll meet 150 people that we've walked another lifetimes with, who will look us in the eyes, and we'll get a transmission of remembrance of, I know you, and there's some kind of key that we ignite in each other of being a multidimensional cosmic soul, having an experience that is more than just space-time. So we, again, I just want to emphasize the magic that is actually part of this transition that we're in, is in the potency that community is serving our awakening.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned festivals, because I would like to take a minute and just talk about festival culture. And my question here is twofold. One is, what's your general sense and feeling about the value of the festival culture, transformational festivals? And two, and this is my main concern here, is how do we take the feeling that we get at these places with these like-minded people, this beautiful experience, okay? How do we take that from being a 3-day experience with people who think the same way that we do and translate it into our lives outside of that context?
Well, I think it's like a threefold question. What's the value, and how do we bring it into the world, sort of?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, well, the value is priceless beyond, what we receive in these sacred containers when we bring our gifts, when we relate in a sacred way. And when I say we relate in a sacred way, it just means that we're creating a unified energy field that is acceptance, that is love, that is supportive, that is inspiring, that is creative. And when we're in those containers, we can really access who we really are. And so people come into those containers and access who they really are in a way that they never experienced. They never experienced that much community. It's a revival of community, festival culture. It's the absolute revival of community, that we can live in harmony and celebration. We can celebrate and coexist in harmony. That's incredible. Can't do that many places. And so the aspects that work, we need to find ways to ground and integrate. And the aspects that don't work, we need to integrate and ground. So I find that our festival culture has a lot of, it's too fringy at this point, and it's amazing. But I feel like what I'm interested in is like how we can start to legitimize it more and transition it into a more accessible paradigm, make it available to more people, and maybe it'll lose its some of its, it's like a risk. It'll either lose its integrity, or the integrity gets spread and we activate more people. I don't know how that's going to unfold, but some of the projects I'm involved in, and some people I'm working with, other visionaries, we're looking at how we can create sustainable cities, sustainable communities that exist beyond just the festival, so that we can have this whole experience, throughout the year. You can bounce from, one community to the next. You can build a community, and as these communities get birthed, these new paradigm cities of light, if you will, these little utopian models of all the solutions that we're learning, all the spiritual ideals that we're learning to embody, all the relationships that we're deepening into and demasking ourselves in, and the solutions of how to live in harmony with the earth again, mixed with technology. It's like, imagine living in a yurt with Wi-Fi. I live on a farm, in California, with 20 other people, mixed generational. There's babies to elders. Someone's turning 75 here tonight. I live in a little cabin and then we have communal meals, and there's a garden, and and everyone sort of has a different spiritual philosophy, but there's a human thing here that keeps us all, we're living in harmony.
Right.
Shit comes up now and then with people, and we have to have counsel, and people clear their stuff, and they claim their feelings that get mirrored by someone else. But for the most part, it's pretty harmonious situation. So, it's pretty exciting. I feel like, we're going to be creating tons of these all over, and that people from the world will come and see them and be like, oh my God, I want to live this way. And they'll go back and they'll bring them to the city, and we'll start to build a bridge between the urban, hyper consumption Western culture and this fringe culture. The more that we legitimize it, the more that people with money and intelligence recognizes the value of what we're creating, and then we find ways to embody and ground and play and speak their language also, and find the universal overlaps of what we're trying to do, because I think there's an underlying mutual commitment that we all have to make the world a better place, and we all have different ideas of how that's going to look, but what's actually going to work, and who's going to steward that, I think we're starting to steward that.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And it's part of this revolution in consciousness, right? Revolution, it comes from a Latin word which means turning back, and human beings lived in that context that you're talking about, where, conflict was mediated, in the community. That we lived that way for tens of thousands of years before quote unquote civilization, right? So this is a kind of a new development, the culture we're living in now. And I think merging our current state with that old state of harmony and conflict resolution is the future. I think that's what we need to build to. And I think that's happening. I think that's in our consciousness now.
Yeah. So, my dear friend Jamaica Stevens talks about re-inhabiting the village. And that's what we're helping steward, is the re-inhabiting the village. But we get to do it in the most fun, awesome way. It's like we can have like permaculture chic, awesome, like eco houses. It doesn't have to be a yurt or a teepee anymore. We can have that also. But we can make it what we want it. We have the alternatives and the options and the resources to build it out. And it's think about all the creative, committed, passionate energy that goes into building a festival for 3 days, and then you just tear it down. Imagine putting that committed, passionate, creative energy into something that's a year round.
Absolutely. Well, look, I know we're about out of time here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your website, your contact information, things you've got coming up in the pipeline, what you're doing?
Yeah. So. Alokananda.com, ALOKANANDA. You can see the different, services I have there. I mainly, at this point, the healing modality that I offer is violet alchemy healing, and it's a distance soul healing modality that I do internationally with people over Skype or over the phone. So if you wanted a personalized session, that's a great way to get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me through the site, or you can email directly at Alokabliss, ALOKABLISS, Alokabliss at Gmail. And, I have sliding scale, and it can be a life-changing session. Some people have, their testimonials are likened to as powerful as, 5 ayahuasca ceremonies and easier to integrate,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really... I'm here in however way that I need to show up for you to be your most awesome self. I'm working on birthing a sustainable festival in 2015, along with Jamaica Stevens and some other visionaries. I'm doing the programming direction for Gratify Festival in South Carolina right now, and I'm starting to work on a really amazing music project for my own personal joy as I step out of more and more production work and more into just wanting to do healing work and sing music.
Awesome. Fantastic. So you'll be at Gratify Festival. We will be at Gratify Festival. I'm sure we'll meet up there, and I hope that everybody listening will meet up with us there as well.
Yeah, me too. I'm bringing in a lot of my elders, and a lot of the collective family, so to speak, of this culture will be there. So it's definitely a unique opportunity to connect into some of the things that we're talking about directly in person with a lot of other people that are carrying this awareness.
Tangible experience, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to share with you and feel your attentiveness and your awareness. And, thanks to everyone out there who tuned in.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, brother. And as always, all that contact info will be linked in the description. Thank you very much. Free Radical Media Podcast.